everybody. Welcome back to Depression Vacation Podcast.
Guess who's back?
Depression Vacation Day.
Back again. The remix.
It's a gross
Mashup.
Sunday outside, so come to Depression Day. I've been really off all day and trying to do anything funny. Like, there have been so many times that Lauren's been like, no, Hal.
Oh, are you not wearing the headphones? If you're not wearing them, I'll wear them. Sorry.
Okay. I mean, I can't.
So somebody is.
Yeah, we usually like to just have one person confirm that we're not recording on silent by mistake.
So it's weird. It's doing the same thing on these headphones that it was doing on the other ones, but I'll keep it on. It's all right.
It looks like it's recording in stereo. And if not, I can always double it over. So.
Yeah. No, it's no problem. And then can you just talk again so I can make sure that I can hear you?
Hello.
Oh, that was good.
Hey, guys, we're doing a sound check over the first minute.
Okay, cool. Hello.
Yeah,
welcome back to the Depression Vacation Podcast.
We have a moderately special guest with us today.
Moderately special.
Well, that's super romantic, Hal. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Sorry, I'm in a spicy mood today. I'm not in a spicy mood. That's a weird thing.
I was in a spicy mood yesterday, but I had to work yesterday, so that's why I was spicy.
Boo.
But it was fine. It worked out. I always hate a Saturday shift, like before and after I work, but like during the shift, I have a great time.
I have not worked a Saturday in almost a month, and it's amazing because I went like 7 months with not having a single Saturday off, and I forgot what they looked like, and it turns out I like them.
That happened to me when I worked at AMC Theaters, because like I never had an evening or a weekend or a holiday to myself.
Ever.
Yeah. Well, that was, so when I took it's still a bit of an irritation that I have to work roughly half the weekends and a lot of nights for lottery. But like when I worked for WITF and I had to manage the lottery, I actually got 0 weekends off. Like I had to work every single weekend unless I got somebody else to cover for me if I was going on a vacation, and like almost every night anyway. So it was a step up, but 6 or 7 years later, I kind of wish I was on the same wavelength as everybody, especially now that Lauren has a real like cool, nice job.
Yay!
Where she can be a normal person.
I know what daylight looks like, and I know what it feels like to sleep through the night.
I know.
I kind of feel like an infant learning how to sleep. I like it.
I'm learning how to sleep.
Yeah. I'm not good at it yet, but I think I'll get good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Well, luckily, it's a lot of fun
journey
to practice. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's pretty exciting. I actually just. No, I'm being completely serious.
It just sounded so sarcastic.
No, I know.
Naps are exciting.
So one of the side effects I've been seeing with my ADHD medication has been insomnia. So like last night I was up till, well, it wasn't so bad last night. I was up till 1 a.m. But a lot of what it is like I go to bed and then I'm up at 3, 4.
No.
And yeah, so I'm like working on that. I like talked to my doctor about it, and she was like, well, is the ADHD medication working? I was like, well, yeah, it's working, but
I'd also like to sleep. I ran out of my antidepressants like 2 weeks ago, and my refill, because I timed it poorly with my doctor, I don't get another refill till like another week. So I've been without it, and I think that's part of why I'm sleeping so poorly.
But
I
didn't know that.
I literally told you about it this morning.
Did you?
Yes.
Wow, great boyfriend, Hal. I'm just like, today is not my day. Can I hit the reset button and start this day over?
Yes.
All right, hit the reset button on Depression Vacation Podcast.
Sometimes we all need a little reset.
Yeah. But hi, welcome to Depression Vacation Podcast. I'm Hal. This is Shannon with me, and we have special guest Lauren with us today.
Special, not moderately special.
I said this is a reset, so
I'm sorry.
We're fixing the mistakes of the
to
past.
say even very special guest.
Oh, see? She's being nicer to me than you are.
Maybe she should date you. Who knows?
She's a married woman now.
That is true.
My husband doesn't like it when I flirt with the ladies, so.
But the ladies love it.
Yeah, they do.
That's an interesting thing that I never, I don't know how I would feel about that, and I don't think it would bother me, but also I have never been in that situation, so.
What, if I flirted with women?
Yeah, I never dated somebody who was like openly bisexual.
Yeah. I think we have talked about this briefly, where I am heterosexual, but I do flirt with women all the time. So if that's a problem, maybe let's take that conversation off the air.
All right, so we're back with moderately special guest Lauren
right here, right now. Well, so that's something that I think I've talked about on the podcast before, that I've had different like reactions to it from people I've dated in terms of like what the comfortability is. And the best way that I can kind of like express as a openly bisexual person is like, really it's, and I recognize the difficulty is that, you know, you are kind of naturally, instinctively ready to be kind of territorial around other men, but you kind of subconsciously see women as not a threat because like it isn't usually.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, when I've interacted with, you know, ex-boyfriends, they've been like, oh, no, you know, it's just this person. It's okay if you flirt with them. And it's like, okay, but I'm bisexual. I'm just as likely to cheat on you with this person as I am with this other person. Not that I would ever cheat. That's not who I am.
Right.
But, like, if you're thinking about it in terms of, like,
probability.
Like, it's, and so I feel
it's
like
equal probability.
I feel like I told this story on the podcast before, so if I did, you can stop me. But
we like your stories.
I know, but I hate repeating myself.
I do nothing but repeat myself, and I hate repeating myself. So.
Life is long. Statistically, you're going to repeat yourself a lot.
For
they
sure.
They even showed repeats on TV for first runs. So.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Well, so, I mean, I had an ex-boyfriend who I had gotten in contact, or they had gotten in contact with me, a childhood friend of mine. And when we were growing up, they were the gender they were assigned at birth. They were female. But at the time when we reconnected, they were transitioned to male. Okay. And so I mentioned to my ex at the time, I said, hey, I'm going to go meet up with my old friend for lunch. And I had said, like, the name and the gender and everything like that. And my ex got really dodgy about it, and I was like, well, I mean, I feel like you wouldn't have been upset about this had I not told you that it was a male friend.
Right.
And he was like, well, yeah, I mean, like, you know, you're going out to lunch with a guy. And I'm like, okay, but, like, say this person hadn't transitioned, it would be the same person that I'm going to lunch with, just the same gender as me.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, yeah, I'd be fine with that. I'm like, okay, but I'm bisexual.
Right.
So, like, you have to, you know, and then as, like, a bisexual person, like, it can be really easy to kind of fall into these kind of heterosexual buckets where you're just like, oh, it's okay if I flirt with my friend who's a female because it's a female and I'm in a committed relationship, and so it doesn't mean anything. But you know, something that Ryan brought up to me very early on in our relationship was that he very much was uncomfortable with the casual flirting with, like, my friends and, you know, female, male, what have you. And so, like, that was something that he realized early on. He was like, oh, I should be just as uncomfortable with men as I am with women. And I think that's perfectly valid. He brought that up to you, though.
And
yeah.
A lot of guys, like, who would have those issues would be kind of like, just get angry, get insular, and then let it eat them away on the inside, I suppose.
A lot of them would just, like, in my experience, they get very passive-aggressive about it, and then they don't ever tell you what they're actually upset about, but it's also...
Why don't you tell it to your friend Mike when you have your coffees with him?
Yeah. We're like, you're a 6-foot-tall child. Like, you're not good at concealing.
Well, there's an interesting component to this, because, like, you and I were talking a little bit about this, because I was... A funny story, there's a gentleman I used to play poker with that I was telling Lauren about, who is basically like the worst kind of textbook incel you could possibly imagine. It's funny, all the, like, people I used to play poker with that were, like, not the most exemplary people in the world. But he, like, he worked at Carnes, and he used to try to pick up women while he was on his shift all the time. Oof. Which, as women, I could assume was the wrong word.
Yeah.
That this is the thing you want least when you're shopping for bacon, chicken, and rice.
Oh, absolutely.
But then he would get, like, horribly, violently angry when they would not want to talk to him because, you know, how dare they do their shopping while they come in here. And my mom was telling me the other day she was at Carnes and she noticed that he still works there, but he only works in the back. And I'm like, there's no way that's a coincidence.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But it kind of goes to, like, the point I wanted to make about that, too, is, like, women, it seems like, are able to have, you know, friendships with anybody that are not, like, the end goal is not sexual or the end goal is not to date this person. Mm-hmm. And, like, one of the toxic things I was sort of raised with was, like, I don't know if my dad explicitly said this to me or if it was like more implicitly implied, but he sort of like led me to believe, like when I was a kid, it's like, yeah, every single girl has a crush on you, Hal, so if anybody talks to you, that means they want to get with you. And I'm like, again, hearing that when you're in 6th grade poisons your view of the world for quite some time. So it's tougher. And I feel like a lot of men get this from their fathers. So it's hard to deprogram that. And that's sort of like just and I think that's why jealousy issues pop up so much more with men, is because they're conditioned to believe that any attention somebody gives you is attention with like romance or sexual like attention in the end game, when it's not actually.
I think, I know at least for me, I was raised very much the opposite. It was very conditional of my mom being like, if you do this, boys won't like you.
Yeah.
And like boys don't like girls who do this. So it was always ingrained in my head that boys want nothing to do with you because you're too weird. You're too red and you're too gangly and they don't like it.
If you wear pajamas in public, boys won't like you.
Yeah, exactly. So like the mentality of assuming that like everybody is interested, it didn't hit me until like college that like, oh, there's actually some truth to it for women and it's horrible.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that also, what's the word I'm thinking of? But like conversely, got it. When we're thinking about, you had said that, the perception was that if someone interacted with you, it meant that they were sexually interested in you or what have you. Mm-hmm. At the very least, like, wanted something from you. But I think that also comes into play from how we interpret boys and men's actions and behaviors from a very young age. So mm-hmm. I have a 1-year-old nephew, and how many times have I heard, oh, he's such a flirt, or, oh, he's going to be a hit with all the ladies. I'm like, the boy is, like...
You're already sexualizing the boy sort of at
and
one.
like when you're a little girl, it's, if he picks on you, it's because he likes you.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite like fallacies.
Yeah, so like the projection, especially when we're children, the projection of how girls and boys interact, mm-hmm. it has nothing to do with actually what's going on. Yeah. It's how people like on the outside identify it, mm-hmm. and it completely warps as we're getting older, how we interact with...
That causes lifelong damage.
Yeah, I've heard particularly the whole picking on you because they like you thing sort of conditions women to, look for love in abusive relationships.
Right, and be okay with violence in a relationship or, being picked on in a relationship. Like, there's a difference, and I think that in most cases, for me anyway, like, I've been in a position where I can... hold Ryan in one hand and hold an ex-boyfriend in the other hand, and like I can tell you about a particular ex-boyfriend who I was the butt of every single joke. Anytime we were out with his friends or just even just the two of us, like I was always the butt of the joke. And Ryan teases me too, but it's different, and like you have to, it's hard to explain, and I feel like a lot of people are like, okay, well, it sounds like Shannon's just excusing Ryan's behavior because
no,
but you see what
it's weird unlearning it, because like you do start out, like I know for me, I dated like exclusively assholes for a very long time.
Man, did I get lucky.
And like it wasn't on purpose, it was just the pattern. And then I started dating like an adult human who knows how to speak to other adult humans.
That's how.
Am I the adult human?
He's the adult human, which feels like a stretch, but he's doing well.
I can talk to other humans.
You're emotionally mature, my
friend.
He
is.
I don't think that very much.
Your girlfriend does, and that's as good as you can get sometimes.
And we do like to josh each other too a lot too. Like there's Lauren yells at me every time I say the word dog, for instance.
My puppy does not like the word dog. He only believes in puppies. There's no such thing as dogs.
Yeah, Doji is acceptable. And there's a lot of times like where I'll be like, "Oh, Gimli, you're such a good Doji."
Yeah.
Aww.
And Lauren catches it every time. She's like, "Good correction there, Hal."
Yeah.
Oh my
but
gosh.
he like it is very. I'm still kind of adjusting to it because I'm used to being with people who like pick on me, but it's kind of in an aggressive way or a mean way.
Right. And you can tell when someone is like intentionally trying to make you feel bad or like intentionally trying to make you look bad in front of other people. And that's how I felt with that particular ex-boyfriend. It was very much like I would say it about it later and be like, hey, this kind of hurt my feelings. And then like him brushing that off and saying like, oh, well, I was just kidding or whatever. Like, you know, and then continuing to make those kind of jokes, like that's when you know that someone isn't actually looking out for your best interest. Whereas if I were to come to even Hal as a friend or even to you as a friend and say like, hey, you made this joke about me, it hurt my feelings, you would probably never tell that joke again. First, and knowing the people in this room probably beat yourself up about it for a while.
Well, this exact thing happened to me actually with somebody who is pretty involved in VidJam and has since become a pretty good friend, but this was after the Lancaster screening. I want to say in like 2018. It was like one of those things where like just improv brain took over. I made something that I didn't think was a bad joke, but she took it very harshly, and it was something like I think the exact thing was sort of like she said she had to go from the after party because she had to get her kids up for school the next morning. And my response was like, oh man, you're the best mom in the world. Like leaving. And my impression was to say that being like, you're leaving this awesome time to go take care of your kids. She did not take it that way at all because Hal's voice can sometimes be like really weird. And so we did have a good discussion about it. However, the good discussion occurred after she had already posted a very lengthy Facebook article calling me an asshole anonymously. Like she didn't call me out by name, and I was like, and I heard about it from a few other people, and my first response was kind of like, I really wish you had come to me before making this big public hoo-ha. But again, we had a pretty good talk about it, and we are friends now, and I've helped her with some projects, and she's helped me with some projects. So like that is a good side of the coin, and I think like if you're a good person and just like emotionally mature, you can have those sort of discussions. Because we're all humans. Like, I'm sometimes more human than humans, and I say and do dumb things all the time. But I will always apologize if somebody, if I unintentionally hurt somebody. I'm trying to find ways to phrase this without making it sound like a sorry, not sorry situation. If I offended you, I am sorry.
Yeah. No, but I think that was really, you hit the nail on the head there, saying like unintentionally, like, I did hurt you. I recognize that I hurt you. I want you to know that wasn't my intention. Yeah. And so, like, I feel like that's different than being like, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Yeah, see, intention's a weird thing to talk about just because so many people use it as a shield to dodge accountability for doing something. So, like, the context of intent has almost become sort of irrelevant with a lot of things because it's been weaponized against people so much. But I think intent is important to discern a little bit if there's an apology being made too.
Yeah, I think intent and accountability have to go hand in hand in an apology. Like when we were little, my dad taught us apologies shouldn't have the word if. So like, I'm sorry if you feel this way. I'm sorry if this joke offended you. Like an apology shouldn't be hypothetical and it shouldn't be reactive. It should be because you did the work and you acknowledge that you did something wrong. I'm sorry that I said this.
There should not be a math equation involved.
Right.
If X equals guilt, then A equals apology.
Because it's basically saying, I'm sorry if you were offended, but if you weren't offended, I'm definitely going to say it again.
Exactly. Or even just like, then I'm not sorry at all.
Right.
Oh my God. It kind of makes me think of like the creepy executive in Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, where he's trying to flirt with Christina Applegate's character. Like, flirt is the wrong word. He's trying to pick her up, and he's like, yeah, if this is all fine and dandy with you, you can come into my bed. And if not, I was just joking.
Yeah.
It's one of the creepiest. I can't even remember what his name is in that movie, but it's one of the creepiest things. And it's also very, I think, indicative of how male behavior was specifically in the 80s, but it probably has not gotten a ton better.
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to this kind of idea of, this has a part to play into it, but like fragile masculinity and being able to take criticism. I feel like men did not, or anybody really, they don't teach that in school. They don't teach you how to take like feedback. And that's why I think a lot of people in the workplace struggle is because, and this is something that I've experienced many times as a manager, is just like not being able to get the other person to hear me because they could immediately shut off. They don't want to hear that they did something incorrectly. And, the best thing to do as a manager in that situation is to, be empathetic and to say, I recognize this is a conversation that can be a little emotional. I want you to recognize that my purpose in bringing this to you is not to make you feel worse about anything. It's to help you grow and learn. And so, like, I think that's the best thing you can do as a leader is to recognize that empathy. Because back when I first started doing management, they told us like, nope, just give them the facts. Like, don't bring feelings or anything into it. But I think it's more important to acknowledge those things.
Yeah. But you also, especially for women in leadership roles, you have to like. You have to put a leash on your empathy too, because
because you'll get taken for a walk.
Yeah, because like I definitely have this with a team member who right now who is going through things outside of work. Definitely acknowledge that and want to do what I can to help them, but it impacts their performance. And then when I want to bring to their attention, here's what we can do to address your performance, the conversation becomes not about that. It becomes about everything that's going on outside, and it's like, I want to sympathize, I want to give you support, but also that's not what we're here for.
Yeah.
Right.
Like we also have to, so it's hard to find the balance between being a supportive person and recognizing like that, you know, sometimes people are fragile, sometimes they get defensive and reactive for a reason, and you want to kind of hold their hand through that. But at the same time, like you need to get them over the line and get them to where they need to be.
It's... There's like as I've brought up a couple times with one of my coworkers who, when he was training, he was a nightmare, and he was like a close to 60-year-old man, and just like so many. I think part of like we're at a good place now, which I never thought was going to happen, but like once he learned his job pretty well and was able to competently do it and not like essentially get depressed for messing things up every day, he turned into a very competent worker. But like it was hard to see, like, because that was ingrained in him, like, a total lack of accountability, that even though he, at his core, was not a bad person, the lack of accountability sort of just made him into a bad person, because he would, and I see this behavior from, not to put him on blast, but my dad all the time, too, that, like, if you do something moderately wrong, the answer is not to just double down and say everyone else is the problem. I blame Trumpism for this, but I think it just made it worse. I don't think
it definitely predates Trumpism.
I know.
I can confirm.
I agree that, you know, I have a teammate who is also in this kind of like not taking accountability, and they are a wonderful person, and they are very good at other parts of what they do. But there are very significant gaps. And so I had to have a conversation with this person last week, and they, you know, they were very defensive when I was saying like, hey, here are some places where we can improve. And it was not a good conversation. I don't think it ended up being very productive. And
they can't all be zingers.
Right. But it was mostly because that person didn't hear all of what I was saying. And so that's why I'm very particular when I start a conversation going into feedback of setting the stage of saying like, this is going to be a difficult conversation. This is why it's going to be a difficult conversation. And then going into, you know, my thing. And a lot of leadership or things that are out there in the corporate world, when you go to look at leadership books outside of the corporate world, like written by other leaders and written by people who've gone off and started their own companies and things like that, what the corporate world kind of feeds you is like, don't do a preamble, just jump right in and like don't beat around the bush. And I'm like, I'm not beating around the bush, I'm laying down context, and I'm making them more comfortable to have this conversation with me.
See, this occurred actually a while ago, because so like one of the more embarrassing conversations I ever had with my boss was the fact that like I couldn't wear my suit coat on the air anymore because I'd gained so much weight that it was too tight, and this was a really like depressing conversation. But she is not necessarily good at having hard conversations, so she beat around the bush like ridiculously for like 5 minutes, and I didn't know what I was being called in the office for, and eventually I was just like, just tell me, come on, like I can, whatever it is. I said I can handle it, but in reality I did handle it, but it just sucked. But beating around the bush forever just made it feel like I was in like serious trouble or something.
Right, and there's a difference between preambling and like laying down the context. You know, if I were to have that conversation with you, like as a leader, I would just say like, how this is something that's difficult for me to bring to your attention, and I recognize that you're going to have some emotions about this issue, and I just want to put that up front. And then I would just, like, I'm not going to beat around for 5 minutes.
The company that I work for, like, when you step into a management role, they have you do all these trainings. Bless you.
Sorry.
And they're big believers in the compliment sandwich.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I don't like that
I hate
either.
the compliment
Yeah.
sandwich. I will not use the compliment sandwich. Like in a situation where you're giving feedback, the compliment sandwich is not productive because they're just going to hear the bread, they're going to ignore the meat, and like they're not going to take what you actually need them to take.
I think if you're training somebody like from the start, the compliment sandwich actually works pretty well. Like, hey, you're doing pretty good at picking this up, but this is something you might need. But if you're a fully ingratiated employee who's been there for several years and you need to have a talk with your boss about something difficult, the compliment like, oh, Hal, you're really good at your job, but your coat's too tight. I'm like, well, I know I'm good at my job.
It sometimes boxes you in to where you have to find a compliment even if it's completely unrelated to what you're talking about. And it's like, well, you are really good with guests, and I want to acknowledge that and thank you for it. But also, count your damn cash. Like those two things have nothing to do with each other.
Right.
Why bother?
Right. And I think that's very key too when we're thinking about. So first of all, I mean, the compliment sandwich is so well known now. And as we're saying compliment sandwich, just for context, we're talking about a leadership tactic that might be used as a manager, boss, whatever, where you have something negative to bring to an employee, but you want to soften the blow. So you start by saying something nice about them, and then you hurt them, and then you give them another compliment at the end to make them feel better. And
when you put it that way, that feels like emotional manipulation.
It is.
Well, buddy, there's a reason.
Right. So first of all, as an objective tactic, it's a little fucked up. But on the other hand, one of the reasons why it's not effective is because it's so well known. And like as soon as you hear a compliment, you've been called into an office.
You know that's not why you're there.
Right. Exactly. And so you're thinking to yourself, like, you're too much in your head if you know what the compliment sandwich is, and you're like, they don't mean the compliments that they're saying, first of all, which is angering. Like, that's you're either lying to me or you're only saying it to me so that you can say something negative to me.
Yeah.
You're building up goodwill immediately. That's going to be destroyed by the next thing that you say.
Right. Yeah. And then trying to put a Band-Aid on it.
Where I do find the compliment sandwich is, and I don't even think this is a compliment sandwich, I would refer to this as like a compliment melt or open face sandwich, is if somebody is requesting feedback for something like artistic that they're putting together, or like they have you read their screenplay, for instance. I think it is very important because those things are so personal, like when you try to make art, and there is going to be good in it as well as bad. And I think pointing out the good does make them more receptive to what criticisms will come later on in that case. But for work, it's a totally different game.
I think compliment sandwiches are great in like annual reviews or like structured feedback to where you're not calling them onto the carpet for anything. It's just general feedback. They can be very effective then. But when you're trying to identify and train like one specific issue, I think it gets in the way.
Oh, no, I agree. I think a strategy that I use when having to present negative feedback is kind of, and I'm trying to put it down on paper in terms of like, because I know what I do, but I'm trying to explain. So like I said, like providing context and empathy is my first step. So letting them know that it's a difficult conversation and that what the purpose of the conversation is. So, saying like, this is going to be a difficult conversation. I want to talk to you about your leadership skills, and there are some areas for improvement that I really need you to hear for us to move forward. And I'm here to support you through that conversation. And I think that's a really nice little tight kind of starter. And then, giving them the identified, like, you don't want to oversay anything or go back on yourself either, because if you, like, I see a lot of leaders be like, oh, you didn't do this correctly. I mean, it's okay though. It's like, no,
it's not.
But we tend to, or even I've heard other leaders say like, oh, that's my personal opinion. I'm like, no, it's not your personal opinion. It's about, performance. And so you don't want to undermine yourself in that conversation.
No, definitely not.
Something that's been really useful for me is, it's not the same in every industry, obviously, but in my position, there are almost no mistakes you can make that can't be fixed. So that's been really useful to me when trying to have performance-based discussions with team members is like, there's no mistake you can make that can't be
Exactly.
be fixed. However, mistakes are expensive.
Yeah.
So when we find the mistake and we fix it, let's not make the mistake again.
Right.
Yeah.
I think another piece of that too is so I very much believe that in a feedback conversation, they should be doing most of the talking. So once I give them that start and I tell them my facts and just kind of boom, 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 what, the things I identified, I just ask a very simple open question. I say, what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
And I let them run. And if they aren't, providing much into the conversation, that tells you more about how that person is going to move forward with that conversation than anything else, because you can talk to your blue in the face, but if they're not providing anything to the conversation, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah,
It's
it
just
shows
like
a lack of engagement.
It's like being with your therapist, for instance. Like if you want to be there and you have goals for improvement in mind, and you actively engage with your therapist, you'll get something out of it. But if you are like at least one friend of mine who told me that she actively just lied through all of her therapy sessions to get out of there as quickly as possible. I kind of call that the Michael Scott therapy because that's what Michael ended up kind of doing with Toby.
However, listeners, I do want to clarify for the sake of your boss's mental well-being, your boss is not the same as your therapist.
No,
Right,
not
yes.
at all. Did not want to imply that.
Just want to make that
She
clear.
is not paid to listen to you talk.
But I
No.
do listen
Wonderful.
to it so much.
Right. And I think and especially as women in leadership, we fall into these traps a lot
Yeah.
where, they play on the heartstrings and that kind of thing. And
Joke's on them, I don't have one.
well, and those are the situations where you got to be firm, and that's a tough skill to learn as a woman in leadership. And honestly, what it comes down to is, so coming back to my little flow chart of action, I guess. I've got my context and empathy. I got my facts. I ask for their thoughts. Try to let them talk as long as possible. Only asking like follow-up questions.
Yeah.
And not criticizing their contribution to the conversation and be like, no, that's not a good idea.
I do have exceptions to that because I get a lot of what are your thoughts, and then it becomes them trying to drag down another team member with them
Right.
or
Those
deflect.
are the situations-
Those are the situations
yes.
where I'll interrupt and I'll say, this is becoming unproductive, we're getting off topic, let's go back to what we're
Yeah.
here to discuss.
Exactly. No, I agree with that. And when it comes down to it, then it's the action plan. So just putting action in place and setting up follow-up. And again, just like an ending with empathy, saying, I
Yes.
know you can do it. I honestly am here to help you develop, to help you learn. I want you to get to the next step of your career. This, I believe, is a crucial part of that. And so that way they leave knowing that they have someone in their corner.
I wish I had a boss like you, like earlier in my life.
It makes a huge difference because like not my last regional director, he was a nightmare, but the one before him, she is absolutely amazing. She's still a very close friend of mine, and she was an amazing mentor in terms of management because she was always very she's very empathetic, and that's all great, but she is also how did she phrased it to me by saying, like, you have to remember that not every person on your team sees this as a career. For a lot of, especially in a job like mine, for a lot of them, it's just a job, or maybe they don't see it as a career yet. And you're their first manager in this industry. You're going to be the one that sets the tone for, is this something they want to pursue and something they want to keep doing, or is this just a job until they find something better?
Yeah. Well, there's always something you can learn from pretty much every job. And that's the way I go. And like, I think a good example, and this might have been something I talked about on a previous podcast as well, is like when I was 21 years old was the first time I really got to supervise like a huge group of employees at Hershey Park. And like it was like 120-ish employees and like 6 under supervisors that I was splitting with like 2 other supervisors over the course of a summer. But boy, did Hal crash and burn at 21 years old, like doing that, because like especially since I'm a people-pleasing person sort of at my heart, as much as I try to get done with that, like it's hard dealing with that many different types of personalities, and especially the supervisors. Like I ran afoul of a couple of them for good reason, because I was like kind of a dick when I ran out of empathy and didn't realize how to talk to other people as they are adults and not your like employees underneath you. And like things got pretty ugly pretty fast, but like I tried to talk with a couple of the supervisors after I had been a dick to the point where there was no going back anyway. And I kind of told one of them, was like, yeah, part of the reason I want to do this is I want to learn how to like manage people. Like, obviously I'm doing something wrong here. So like, what can we do to fix it? And the answer was there wasn't really anything to do to fix it at that point, but just file it away under like learning experience as like, you know, you talk to people like they're people and not like they're fodder in your ride running machine.
Yeah.
So, which was a valuable lesson. It was a very expensive lesson to learn, but it was a valuable lesson.
One of the hardest lessons that I had to go through as a manager was recognizing that the purpose of managing is not to put everything on your own shoulders. It's learning how to, and I crashed and burned on that. I remember before I got into banking, I did retail and then with AMC, which is kind of retail. So I was very used to operations and auditing and that kind of thing. And so when I got to banking, I thought, oh, this is easy. I'm operations. This is great. And I ended up pretty much taking everything on myself. And that was the first audit I ever failed. And I cried. I was so angry with myself. And what I came to learn was that I was doing both sides a disservice. I was doing myself a disservice by putting it all on my shoulders and allowing things to fall through the cracks that way.
Yeah.
But also, I was not helping the team as a leader. I wasn't giving them the opportunity to learn or grow, or even giving myself the opportunity to be able to teach something to someone else and to make it a more of a team accountability.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm working on a lot now as a leader, is like, now that I recognize those things, is these are skills that I'm trying to hone of like being able to delegate, recognizing strengths and finding tasks for certain people that are going to excel at it.
Yeah.
I am definitely adjusting to it because in my previous position, the company that I worked for didn't really allow for delegating. They were not supportive to that. They didn't want to, schedule hours for training. They didn't want to. I mean, the buck stopped with me, which is a manager. You get that to an extent.
You're accountable. At the end of the day.
That I'm fine with, but it came to a point where I was covering shifts nonstop.
Yeah.
I was.
I'll just do it.
Yeah.
If I do it, I know it'll be done right. I'll know it'll be done on time.
Right.
Yeah.
Not even like I chose to do it because I knew it would get done right, but also like they slashed and burned my schedule to where they were only allotting me a certain amount of payroll hours per week, and it wasn't enough to fuel operations. So it just became, we're going to put Lauren in that slot because she's salaried and won't get overtime.
Right.
And it just, so now I'm with a company that is like, yeah, you need to put so-and-so on the schedule for more training, go ahead and do it. Or like,
is this real life?
Yeah.
Is this how people operate?
You need to pay so this person can take this course, go ahead, pay the money. And it's so foreign to me to have that level of support. It's almost like if you have a backache for a really long time and then you have a good day and it feels weird. That's kind of what this feels like. My backache is gone.
I'm going through a very similar experience. And I'm really being put through. I mean, last year was probably, or this past year, I'll say, was the most challenging year of my career. Being with my previous company, and then, coming to this new company in the middle of my wedding and my honeymoon and all of these things.
Totally low-key time to make a transition.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
There's nothing else going on.
Yeah.
You just show up and say, I do, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, I have learned a lot of lessons over the last year about leadership. And it's funny because, I mean, I'm going into my 10th year of leadership. And it's a constant learning process. And, and I've said this before on the podcast, but it's worth saying again, that like managers that are out there, like, we see you. I know that like we get a lot of shit from employees. We do. And, anyone who is, a grunt, and for lack of a better word, because I haven't had my third cup of coffee yet, like when we're taking a look at the full scope of a company and we're saying like, oh, my manager sucks, like you have to recognize the pressure that comes from up top and
the sheer number of hats that have to go on this tiny, stupid head.
I feel like I have a pretty good relationship with my boss overall, although there are always times where conflict rises
and there are
up.
bad managers for sure.
And there are, like, my boss does a lot of things very well. There are a couple things she does not do well, in my opinion. And again, this depends on the mood that Hal is in, because if he's emotional about something, things go out the window. Mm-hmm. But I think both of my bosses actually do a pretty good job at their job. And there tends to be a lot of grumbling sometimes from some employees who actually are not like making an active, really good attempt to do their job correctly.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of the time I have to sort of be like, okay, this is a fair gripe, but I think that perhaps you're not taking the full account into question about this particular thing that might be out of her hands, and she might be trying her best, but we don't know. Again, that depends on how emotional I am about being told I'm too fat for my clothes on a given day. But
I mean, and honestly, that's a hard conversation, for anyone to have, and I feel bad for the person who had to have that conversation with you, and I feel bad for you.
Yeah.
There's no one who wins in that conversation.
Yeah, no one's having fun there.
yeah, nobody's having. I totally get that.
And I think there is now, if you're a bad manager, there's a way to have that conversation so badly that like you should never have a conversation ever again.
Well, she started off too by saying, I actually asked HR how to proceed on this, and I'm like, no, don't bring more people into this and don't tell me.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, so that was, I just wanted to make this point a minute ago, and that exactly goes along with my point, is that one of the hardest things for a manager is having a conversation while recognizing that you have to say things in a certain way, first of all, for legal reasons. Mm-hmm. Second of all, you need to make sure that when that person walks out of your office, that they're going to be okay working with you for the foreseeable future.
And there's also, like, I wasn't trained in HR. I didn't study that. I didn't seek out an HR
there are
position.
People with master degrees in HR.
But my job very, very heavily involves HR. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's something that you have to train yourself and get comfortable with, even though I am not the kind of person who does well in HR. I don't thrive there.
Right. And so this comes back to this idea of like and I'm not saying this is the case with you. This is a generalization that I'm making here. And this is something my dad and I were discussing at length, is that when we see an employee who is excelling, what do we want to do? We want to promote them. Mm-hmm. That usually means promoting them into a position of leadership. But more often than not, the skill that they are utilizing to exceed in their current position is not the skill of leadership.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you're asking this person who's a great producer to hold other people accountable to their goals. That's an entirely different skill.
Yeah.
And also removing the thing that they thrive from, because when you move into a leadership position, your hands-on involvement becomes smaller. It drastically reduces.
One of my bosses, I think, did fit into this category because, like I was saying about like my experience flaming and burning, being a supervisor at Hershey Park the first year, when she was, I think this was the first leadership promotion like she ever got at this point in her life, and I noticed like a lot of the same rookie mistakes that I made at that point too, like. There is a tendency, because you do need to have a semblance of authority, like if you get some clapback from your employees, even if it's like reasonable clapback, if you're not used to like handling that, you might have a tendency to just be like, no, this is the way it's going to be and you have to do it because I'm your boss. And I have recognized from my own experience and also reading tons of books when I was taking the MBA courses that this is like the worst way that you can treat employees, is to treat them like I'm the parent and you're the child.
It's also like I had a night auditor at one point who applied to become a front office manager, and doing the interview with him, asking him what he wanted in that position, what appealed to him. He's like, I'd really like to get away from the desk. I'd like to interact less with guests. I'd like to be more focused on like the back office. And I'm like, I'm glad we had this talk, because that's not contrary to the title. That's not actually what the job is. Okay. So you also have to wonder, like, in promoting someone, are you doing a disservice to like just their general happiness at work?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's something that I've experienced many times, and something I'm experiencing now is that I see someone has a lot of talent, but their talent is not aligned with the position that they're in currently.
Yeah.
Now, another piece I wanted to come to, because you had said something, Hal, about, when we implement something, right? And you're saying like, well, I'm your boss. That's what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. Coaching through change is very challenging.
Yes.
I've never heard it put that way, so please tell me about coaching with change.
So, you work for a company, and say it's, a national company or even, my current bank is a regional bank. We're in 5 different states. So there are obvious levels of things that things go through before they come down to us to be rolled out. Any kind of change, any new product, whatever it is. So it can be really easy as a manager to say like, hey, we have this new thing. Let's do it. And when people come back at you and they're just like, oh, well, that's stupid, or why are we changing again? And I mean, that's the one thing you can count on in any industry is change. We're always innovating, always trying to be better. And I found the best way to approach that is, you know, first of all, it's very crucial as leaders that we're not being like, yeah, this is dumb. Why are we doing it?
Right.
And, you know, that's probably the most corporate thing I'll ever say.
I know, but it also, like, it sets the tone where if your employees are just like, oh, it doesn't make sense, and you're like, I know, but they said we gotta.
Right.
Yeah, there's...
sorry. So something that has been very important for me to learn is that when we're going through these changes, there's a reason why we're going through these changes. And this is what I need to communicate to my team is, first of all, this is not a whim. Whatever they're implementing, they have put in money, energy, man hours into implementing.
There's been testing and retesting. There has been, before it got to us, it has been in the works for a year.
Right. And along with that, one of the most crucial parts of any initiative for anything in the business is when you execute it, once it launches. Because here's what they're going to do. It's going to launch. If it's stupid, they will find out very quickly.
Oh, man, it's funny you mentioned this because this exact thing has been happening, as Laura knows, because I've talked about this at work recently. You were talking about whims in general, and a lot of... I don't know if this is exactly the case, but I'm pretty sure a lot of things are decided on whims from, like, my big boss at work. And one of the things that they've implemented recently, which has been vastly unpopular with every single person it's touched, is we wear uniforms now. I'm pretty, like, ambivalent towards the uniforms. As noted, Hal struggled with wearing a suit coat on the air anyway. So the fact that I just have to wear a polo is kind of, like, appealing to me from that perspective. And so I was really, like, excited about the concept of uniforms, even though most people weren't. But I can admit after seeing myself on the air that I look noticeably shabbier just wearing a polo shirt as opposed to wearing a suit and tie. And it has been a vastly unpopular opinion with some of my coworkers, some of whom have like been reduced to tears after conversations they've had with one of my bosses over this. There were other factors in play there. Like, this isn't my boss. Like, she also is not the person who had this idea for uniforms. She's just trying to coach us through the change and doing the best that she level can while trying to appease the higher powers that be and then keep her employees happy. And it's a very delicate dance to do.
It is.
And the fact that the uniforms are unpopular and unflattering doesn't necessarily mean that uniforms are a bad idea. It could also mean you're in the wrong uniforms.
Yeah.
And so this is critical, is that the crucial step here is rolling it out. And the best thing that we can collect from that is feedback.
Yeah.
So what I always tell my team is like, hey, we are implementing this. Remember that change is inevitable.
Yeah.
It is really crucial that you give me whatever feedback you have on this practice, the pros, the cons, everything, because that's the only way, if it's stupid, that it will change. Because if we just grumble inside and say, this is stupid, then it's never going to change. But if we come back to, so for example, like with the uniform situation, like as a manager, what you would want to do is talk to each of your employees and say like, hey, what are the pros and cons of this? What are you seeing? And how that's really crucial feedback, saying like, I've noted watching the footage, I believe that we do not look as presentable.
Yeah,
or we don't, that is crucial feedback.
Well, the interesting thing is like feedback is not like, this is an aspect of our work culture which is not the greatest, is that feedback is not really encouraged. And this comes from the top because like the big boss is, I will charitably say, one of the worst types of
Charity
personalities.
is like causing him physical pain.
Yeah, to put in charge, because he very much does treat everybody like a child. It very much is I'll do what I want. He brags about the fact that these things are come on whims, essentially. So it's like, oh, you didn't think this decision that affects us at all. You just did it for whatever reason, and then think it's a joke to everybody. And this is also why I have so much like respect for my other bosses, is I know they have to manage his personality in addition to trying to sell his decisions, which they have no no real say into the under employees while trying to keep everybody happy. And that cannot be the easiest job in the world.
Oh, that part sucks.
Yeah, but the feedback has got, like, and we think that this is going to change because public feedback has been another issue. Like, one of my absolute favorite witnesses, who's like a doll who I love seeing every single time. When I was first starting off at the lottery, I didn't smile when I was on the air, and she left me like a wonderfully sweet yet condescending in a sweet old woman way voicemail saying I should smile on the air. You look so handsome when you smile, and when you don't smile, you look so serious. And I know that you think you're serious, but it looks like you're unhappy to be there giving away money, and you should be happy when you're giving money to people because you're so handsome when you smile. And I was like, well, that's what it feels like to be told you should smile more. But
Yep.
but I was talking with her just the other day, and again, I love this woman to death. Like, she's one of my favorite people, and she went on a similar 5-minute rant about, like, oh, those uniforms, they look so bad. Like, you look so sloppy up there, like you're a bartender at a TGI Fridays or a gas station attendant. Right. And I'm like, I love the specifics in comedy, and hearing, like, it's so much more insulting to be told that you look like a bartender at a chain restaurant that's going under, as opposed to just a bartender anywhere.
Right.
And I was like, well, it's so, and she even, like, qualified it with, like, I hope you don't think I'm a bitch, and I hope that you don't not bring me back over this.
No,
like,
I think you're the opposite of a bitch. I think you're my hero.
Yeah, well, that's what I told her. I was like, I can't wait to tell everybody else that you said this because you have echoed a lot of similar feelings.
Right.
But again, this is like, getting back to the point at hand, like, it's an unpopular decision that is, you know, my mantra usually when they change things at my job is kind of like, yeah, I'll complain about this for 2 weeks, but then I'll get used to it.
Right, and that's the issue, is that when we're talking about these changes, so first of all, like, as leaders, we need to first give the why, because nobody's going to do anything if you just say, because I said so. We learned that years ago. But, like, saying, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is what we want to try to combat this other issue, and we're rolling this out. And so as a leader, first you got to get the why. But second of all, as a leader, if you're going to be, and even as a company owner, as a CEO, if you're going to be in a successful organization, you need to have feedback and a plan in place to respond to that feedback.
Yeah.
And what's also crucial about it is that I want to put this out to everyone in the world because I learned this really recently. One conversation, generally, as long as if you play it right.
Legal disclaimer.
One. And listen, I don't want anybody coming at me.
What were we saying about beating around the bush before?
No, okay, but generally, one conversation will not get you fired. Generally.
Unless it's, unless you put on a spectacular show.
Yes.
You're
and
probably
so
okay. Yeah.
That's what I want to kind of get out there in terms of feedback. Because recently I sat down with my boss, and I've gotten so used to, like, filtering myself and, like, trying to say things in the most professional, people-pleasing way as possible. But recently when I sat down with my boss, she asked me my feedback on something. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I had feedback. I was like, this is not what she wants to hear. And I thought to myself, okay, well, there's a way to say that professionally and kindly, but I'm going to say it. And I did. And we disagreed, but I still have a job.
Yeah.
Like, it's still,
and it's especially crazy. Like, a complaint can be risky because a complaint is vague and a complaint doesn't offer solutions.
As long as you have examples, though.
So because we're a franchised location, but we're corporate owned, we have all of these brand standards that are set at the corporate level by people who don't work in the positions that are affected by those standards.
Right.
So then they roll something out. They're like, we're going to do this new thing and guests are going to love it. And then it gets to our front desk and our front desk is like, this is stupid and everyone hates it.
Yeah.
You have to tell us why, though, because the people creating those standards don't work in that job every day.
No.
They don't know why it's stupid. So if you come to me and you say, I hate this, I'm going to assume it's because it's inconvenient and it makes your job annoying. But if you come to me and you say, I hate this, guests hate this, here's why it's worse, that's different. That's actionable.
We need to know impact is the biggest thing. And the fact that you don't like it is not a good enough reason for us to funnel that up.
Exactly.
And so, I get a lot of customer feedback, and especially, in banking, it's really difficult because things are federally regulated.
Yeah.
So it's like, I can't necessarily go to Congress with this, but but there are things operationally that we can change. There are things like procedurally that we can change that are still within our guidelines and regulations, but will make our jobs easier or make people happier. And that, I think, if you are in a company that needs feedback, give that feedback. If they don't do anything with that feedback, find a different company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also,
They're out there.
Like,
They will take you.
yeah. And there is, I mean, at least for me, again, working with a corporate parent like company, there is a certain degree of like choose your battles.
Oh, of
Yeah,
course.
Of
because
course.
there are some things that if we get our quality assurance inspection and we're not doing certain things, it's going to be an immediate failure. But there are other things that are small, tiny differences that make our guests really happy, and they're going to be like a 6-point deduction. I don't care what corporate says. We're just going to do them. Like, learn what's within your power to affect.
Right.
And change those things first, and then
Exactly.
see what's left over and what you can improve from there.
Right. And that's something I'm going through with my team right now. They've been without a manager for over a year.
It's awful.
And
That
so
was a year for you, Lauren, that they were without a manager?
For the new company, it's been 9 months.
How did it take them this long to find you?
because
I wasn't
she's
looking.
only one Lauren. And that's the thing. Like, you know, some of these companies, they get really lucky when they do find the right person to fill a role. I mean, I consider every company I've ever worked for like pretty lucky.
Right.
Because I have a lot
We're
to
a
offer.
catch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I try to feel that way sometimes, because I feel like I have a lot to offer in a job. But also, I've had the misfortune of working for some very bad men who have made me feel like, oh, you don't matter whatsoever. And this, like, did I ever mention on the podcast what my quit story for WITF was? Oh.
I've never heard this story.
Oh, this is a great story, and this is one of the few people that I could stick it to the, like, times where I stuck it to the man and I won, because it doesn't happen very often. But, like, the whole process, like, I'm very good at every job I do. Like, I don't think that's a brag. I think I, like, legitimately, even though I have room to grow everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
You
I
try
feel like
hard.
I put a lot of effort into, like, especially managing employees when I was here at WITF. And the lottery people really liked me, and they eventually, like, offered me to come over to lottery for a lot more money that I was making, actual benefits, actual time off, and actually occasionally a weekend off. Because the pay and everything here at WITF and also the hours were not great. And so, like, at that time, like, I was 31 years old. I went to my boss. I'm like, hey, listen, man, I like working here. Like, I want to work in media. I like public media a lot. But, like, I need more of a full-time firm commitment from you guys. Because at that point, they'd also cut my hours, so I was technically part-time. And his exact response was like, you do not have the position to make these sort of demands. It wasn't a demand. And, you know, if you don't want to work this, then quit and we'll find somebody else who wants to. And I'm like, okay, well, this is my 2 weeks notice. I'm going to go work for the lottery, which he was speechless. And, like, I kind of walked out and I was like, this was nice. This actually happens in real life. Mm-hmm. And from what I understand, he actually sent a pretty strongly worded email to the man who then became my boss at the lottery. He's since retired, but, like, he was like, oh yeah, this guy sent me an email saying that he was really unhappy that we were poaching his employees. And I remember I specifically...
Maybe be a better employer.
Yeah.
Well, I asked a friend of mine who was a lawyer specifically about this, because we were, like, WITF was a vendor of the lottery, and I was like, is there any way that they could enforce, like, a non-compete clause on me in this case? And she was like, oh, were you full-time or part-time? Like, actually, they just took me down to part-time hours because they wanted to cut costs. And she's like... critical mistake.
Yeah.
If you are a part-time employee, they cannot enforce a non-compete clause if you're
Nice.
going to a full-time position. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
It felt
Yeah.
good to win for once.
Yeah, I think that something I learned very recently was just that, you know, you can make so much of a difference as a leader if you're in the right if you're in the right place.
Yeah.
And so, like, I got sat down with one of my employees recently, and she's worked for my company for 3 years. And we were talking about an incident that had occurred the previous week, and I, you know, it was a negative conversation in some ways. But at the end of the conversation, she got emotional and she said, you know, you are the first boss I've ever had. This is someone who's 40, like 40, 41, something like that. And she said, you are the first person in this company to not make me feel like a number and to make me feel like a person.
When I left my previous property for the one I'm at now, I was so touched by how many of my team members came to me and said things like, I'm still here because of you, or said, like, you're the first manager I had who I felt like they cared about me. Mm-hmm. Like, it's hard to convey that, because in your mind you're always like, I don't want to cross any lines.
Right.
I don't want to overstep or anything. But the fact that they felt that, I felt so proud of that.
And it's a hard conversation to have with, or not hard conversation. Mixed up my words there. It's not always a given that you're going to, be with a boss who treats you like a person.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I've actually been pretty lucky for the most part, because outside of like the boss at WITF, for instance, who was kind of a jerk to me, I feel like every one of my bosses like have treated me very much like a person. My current bosses included, like, even though I have some gripes with them occasionally, because who doesn't? Like, we're all unique personalities, and we don't always see the world the same way. Like, the question of my humanity has never been a question. Like, I am always a person to them, and they always, like, are interested in seeing me succeed, because that also makes the business succeed, but also interested in, like, to a certain extent, making sure that you're happy with your... Like, there have been some employees who've gone... that I've seen over the years who've gone way too far over the cliff in certain directions, to the point where, like, there's nothing they can do for this person anymore unless they radically change their behavior, which at 40 and 50 you're probably not going to do. But
Something you just said that reminded me of something you said.
that's the way this podcast
bring it on back.
works.
Yeah. So we had talked about, like, employees who see it as just a job versus a career, and that sort of thing. I have an employee right now. He's my youngest employee. He's 22. He just got engaged. They just bought a house together. And when I sat him down, when I first got there, I sat everyone down and I said, okay, I want to know about your career goals. I want to know what your strengths are. I want to know, like, what you are looking for from me as a manager. Like, that was the conversation I wanted to have. So this guy, he was like, well, I don't know if banking is going to be it for me. I've also been interested. He was like, I wanted to do the military, but I can't do the military because I have a shoulder thing. He was like, oh, I've been thinking about law enforcement, or I've been thinking about construction, linemen, like all this stuff. And I mean, once I got him to open up, he was a chatterbox. Like, he just went on. I was like, this is the easiest conversation I've had out of the other 5 of you. Like, he was very open, and he's a very intelligent young man. And we had a really great conversation. And I told him, I said, listen, I know that you said that you're not sure about banking. Do I want you to stay in banking? Of course. I don't want to lose you. You're a good employee. Like, that's the thing. But I told him that, like, my responsibility as a leader is to develop you towards your career goals, whatever they are. Yeah. So moving forward, if you're going to stay in banking, great. I'll teach you anything you want to know about banking. If you don't want to be in banking, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about being a productive member of a team, about anything that I can teach you that you can take to your next career move. I want to teach you in the next few months. So think about, the skills that I have that I can impart onto you as a leader, whether it's banking or what have you. And another piece of that was I had told him, like, I did an exercise with my team where we talked about what we wanted to be when we grew up. And so, for example, mine was I wanted to be an astronaut. And so one of the follow-up question to that was, like, what do you do today that relates to what you wanted to be when you grew up? And so, banking and an astronaut, that's pretty far away from each other. But I then, like, looked inwardly and I said, okay, well, what things made me want to be an astronaut? Curiosity. That was the biggest one. Was this was
way to look at that.
Right. Like, this was something that I was really interested in. So, like, when I was a kid and I wanted to be an astronaut, I read books on astronomy. My dad got me a telescope. I was always looking at the stars, learning about
we discovered was an anagram of astronomer, moon tamer, or something like that.
Something like that.
So, what's going back to, like, those roots of, like, the core of your values, you can make those connections. And so that's what I was trying to teach my team. And it was a really great exercise to go through. I had another one who, she wanted to be a vet when she grew up. And I was like, okay. She was like, yeah, but, I discovered it was gross. And I was like, sure, fair enough. Yeah. But, like, something I can take away from that is your compassion. And when I see you interact with your customers, compassion is at the root of everything that you do. And you want to help people and you want to make them solve their problems and things like that. Like, you still carry a piece of that childhood need with you into your adult life.
Yeah, when I started working in hospitality, I started as a night auditor because there was a job opening and I needed a job.
Same.
But
not nighted on.
Right.
Yeah.
But I never went into it thinking hospitality was going to, like, become my career or I'd still be there 10 years later. I just needed a job. But I was very lucky that I walked into a place that had a compassionate general manager that encouraged creativity, that encouraged me to find ways to make things special where I was. And that sort of solidified that, I actually really like this. I can actually really do this.
Isn't that cool when you like walk into something you weren't expecting to be a career and realize that you really enjoy it? So.
Yeah, and I think about it all the time because if I had had different leadership at that property, I wouldn't still be in hospitality.
Sure.
If I had had someone who had checked out or just said, just run the night audit and leave me alone, I wouldn't still be doing what I'm doing.
I think the opposite's probably true for me because like I mean, I learned something from every job I have, but specifically because I wanted to work in TV, movies, and media for pretty much my entire life, like from when I was 16 or 17 on. And I had some bosses that were good for the most part, but for the vast majority of people I worked for in media were terrible people. But again, I learned everything. Like working for all the places I worked for in Hollywood, I learned that I didn't want to be a mean person to my employees because I had a lot of bosses who were really cruel for no particular reason. I also learned I wanted a work-life balance because I was usually stuck there 14 to 15 hours a day. But yeah, I never thought I was going to be a lottery official, but it turns out it's like Shannon was saying, it plays on things that I really enjoyed. Like I feel like I have compassion for people. And one of the good bosses I had in California had told me was like, I like how you interact with people because you really engage with people. He was like, you look them in the eyes and you actually listen to them as opposed to just trying to get away from a conversation. And that works out really well with the lottery because we have to engage with older Pennsylvanians for the public every day. And I genuinely like listening to a lot of their stories, hearing how their lives are going, hearing weird things that they've done throughout their lives, occasionally hearing some off-color things that I have to pivot away from, but even I've got lots of witnesses that sometimes will rant about uncomfortable things, but they have such a good personality, a good spirit, and a good heart at least that I still really like them. And I kind of am in the position of like, I'm never going to change their mind about things, like, so let's just be as nice as possible. And something else you said, Shannon, too, was about like grooming people to be better at whatever career they want. There was a younger guy who used to work for the lottery whose parents are witnesses still. So I hear about like what he's up to a lot of the time. And he was pretty young. He was like 24-ish when he got the job, like maybe 26 when he left. And because I took the job like almost immediately after he left, and I was like, this is a dream job. Like, why did he leave? And everybody was kind of like, he was young, he didn't really know what he wanted. And his parents still say that, like, even though he's had a number of other good jobs since then, his parents say that he still sort of regrets leaving the lottery because it, like, especially for as young as he was to get a posting as good as that, it was a really good posting. So, yeah. Not to brag. My job has a lot of ups and downs, but I really love it. I really enjoy it. It's always... I like that it's always interesting, and I'm never bored sitting at a desk. So
yeah, one of the things that I was 18 when I got my first like supervisory management position, and something I experienced for the first 6-7 years of being a manager was managing high schoolers. So like for a lot of high schoolers, I was their first boss.
Yeah.
And I didn't take that lightly. I realized very early on the influence that I had and the impact that I could have on these kids. And like it still kind of like fuels my heart with joy when I like see, because sometimes when I leave a job, the ones that I really like, I'll friend on Facebook or whatever. But I mean, just seeing them grow, and like some of those kids that I was their first boss, like they have kids now, and like they're doing
weird?
crazy, amazing things. And like another one is pregnant. One is like a paralegal. Another one is like studying abroad, and like it's just these amazing things that you get to see as a leader. And like I don't know. I like to think that I had a piece in that of their success, of like being there for them and being a role model. So I mean, if that wasn't the case, then fine. But I hope
but
for
you like
somebody
to think
I was.
it.
Yeah,
I think that's probably the case more often than not.
I'm almost never happy when someone who works for me quits.
Oh yeah.
But when someone who works for me quits because they got an awesome opportunity somewhere, that feels so cool.
Yeah.
Like it feels like even in a teeny tiny peripheral way, I helped them hone whatever skill it was they needed. That's so exciting. And then you get to watch them go and do something that like, if it makes them feel excited and valuable as I feel about my job, like that's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. And that's another, like on a smaller level, that's something I enjoy as a leader is like when I have those conversations of like, what are your career goals? What are your strengths? Right now I'm very lucky that I have a team who has varying ideas of where they want their career to go. So I'm in this unique situation where I'm like, oh my gosh, I have projects, and like I'm gonna give this one to you because you are interested in operations, and I'm gonna watch you enjoy this and watch you like watch the wheels turn. Or like if it's a and so what my company is doing right now is we're doing this initiative to make processes more efficient and to review all of our software and our procedures and like like the way our policies are written and everything. And I spoke to the CEO and I was like, hey, I want a seat at that table. I want my team to be one of the teams that
That's
like
awesome.
pilots.
Yeah.
I love hearing that.
I was like, I want to be a part of this, and I think my team is the perfect team to pilot these things because there is such a good group of diverse people of differing interests and areas of expertise. And so, like, I'm excited that these projects are coming up that I can like get them involved in and get them excited, rather than just like the day in and day out of like taking people's checks.
I had a team member on my new team told me, he's like, I love what I do. He's like, eventually I'd like to be a QA auditor for our parent company, our major corporation. And like to become that, you have to have like 5 years of GM experience. And this kid is still on the desk. So we're talking 10, 15 years down the line is what he's looking
That's
at.
kind of exciting that somebody would want to stay in the business that long.
It's so exciting, and it means that he's very operationally minded. He is looking at the nitty-gritty of how we run things. He like has the brand standards damn near memorized, and that's like 400 pages. This kid's insane. This kid is a madman, and I absolutely love him. I lit up like it was Christmas when he told me this, because like that is something I hate. I mean, I don't hate it because I understand them, but it's time consuming.
Yes.
And it feels very like particular.
And so I've learned that like in terms of delegating, if it feels like busy work to me, it's probably not to someone else.
Yes.
And that's something that I kind of had to, because I used to be like, oh, this is a little tedious, I'm just going to do it so that, you know, it's just out of the way. But I mean, really, if just taking a look as a leader at tasks and saying like, okay, maybe this isn't the best use of my time. Maybe this is not my expertise. Maybe, you know, someone else would be just as good, if not better, to do this task than I am. You know, even if it's just as simple as looking something up for a customer.
Yeah. And finding the person who wants to do those things and is good at those things is like, that's a goddamn gift.
Like
it's so exciting.
What you were saying too about like something I've been considering doing a lot, because like the witness interaction and scheduling part of the job is actually a lot of additional work on top of my regular job. But I really just like it because I like talking with them, seeing where their lives go. And I was thinking about like possibly, because the one gentleman I was talking about who like grew into a pretty good worker over the course of a while, although it took him a while, one of the things he is also very, very good at is witness interaction and just like engaging with people in general. And so I'm kind of debating, like talking to my boss and being like, how would you feel if I delegated some responsibility here to this guy? Not just to throw him a bone, but also like I was fairly harsh on this person for very good reason for a lot of his like training time.
But now he stepped up.
Yeah, he stepped up. Like, I really like, I always try to, it has burned me many, many times, but I always try to leave the door open for somebody to prove my perception of them wrong if it's a bad perception. So, like, you know, I used to tell people, because some people were kind of like, what would it take for you to like this guy? Because I very vocally did not like him. And I was like, maybe if he doesn't mess up for a year, we can get back into that territory. And guess what? He hasn't done anything particularly bad in a year, and he's actually developed into a good employee. And that's, I like being wrong in those cases.
I've never heard Hal aggressively dislike someone as much as he used to dislike this man. So the turnaround is remarkable. It's so cool.
Well, actually, Lisa said that like after like one of our offbeat shows recently. I'm not going to say the details of what this was, but I was kind of like, oh, this guy here, do you want us to just be a jerk to him out of solidarity? And she's like, Hal, I don't think you could be a jerk to anybody. And I'm like, it's rare, but it does exist.
Yeah.
So I guess like in conclusion, as we're like running down on our arbitrary amount of time, like what's the quality that both of you, I'd say like best as being super, since both of you are super like leaders and bosses, I am not, but like what's a quality that you like in like your bosses, and what's one you really try to exude in the way you treat your employees?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Sense of humor.
Yeah.
That's my, all of my best bosses have had a great sense of humor, and I always want my team members to come to work feeling like it's going to be a fun day.
I'm starting to see why you date me now, because I have an excellent sense of humor.
We've discussed this. It's very much a thing.
Stroke my ego.
I think a big thing for me is like transparency, and there's a way to be transparent while also protecting like what you need to protect, because there are so many things as a leader that you can't say to your employees about how you're feeling and like the things that are stressing you out. But being transparent when you can goes a long way, and being genuine, something that I've always appreciated in a boss. My last boss did not do this well. That like. On the surface, like the first couple times she interacted with me, I felt like, oh, like she's kind of interested in my life. But then I realized that like over time she'd ask me the same questions like over and over again. I'm like, okay, I know you have a lot of employees, but it's starting to feel like it's not like genuine. Like you're just trying to check a box of talking to me once a month.
Yeah. What I always think about when I hear that is, have you ever seen Not Another Teen Movie?
Mm-mm.
The one scene where like the slutty sister girl like walks out of a room, walks up to next to somebody. She's like, "Hi, I'm Angela. I know we just had sex 2 minutes ago."
Right.
And that's what that reminds me of.
Yeah.
Like, so tell me about your life. Well, I did.
It kind of, every conversation kind of feels like, hi, nice to meet you. We've worked together for 10 years.
Yeah. So I think like the transparency and being genuine are critical for being a leader when it's appropriate, and recognizing those things and protecting yourself. I think that's so important too, because especially for women in leadership, it's so easy for us to get overly invested emotionally and to feel like we need to take responsibility for every single thing that happens. And as leaders, we should. At the end of the day, we are accountable, but we don't need to carry that emotional burden.
Man, did you pick a good day to say that, because we watched the Barbie movie last night, which was my first time seeing it, and that is very much something discussed.
Yes, please.
Especially like, oh, who's your CEO? That's me. Your COO? That's me. Your CFO?
Yeah.
Another guy? That's me. Are there
This
any
company
women?
was literally built on women.
Well,
We had a woman in the 90s.
And another one at some other point.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So-
women in leadership roles, I can imagine, are like a lot more difficult than men in leadership roles.
I think it's just a different set of skills that you have to hone. Because men in
Absolutely.
leadership, I mean, they have challenges, they have the same operational issues to face. So I think it's just it's just projecting those challenges differently.
It's
It's
two
the same
different
job.
skills.
Yeah, but you just have to carry the skill set differently.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so
Well,
this-
that was really cool. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me
I get
too.
excited about this kind of thing.
conversation could. Me too. I just said
yeah.
me, but
Me.
I feel like this conversation could go on a lot longer.
Oh, yeah,
probably.
for sure.
Because there's so many good intricacies and so many good things to talk about with like work culture. Like I feel like some of the work culture episodes we've had have focused significantly more on the negative and what people are doing wrong. But I feel like this was a good smorgasbord of like good things and things you might want to work on, sort of.
I think I learned a lot from Shannon that I can take to work too now, which feels really nice.
You'll have to come on the podcast more often than once every 6 months.
Oh, darn. What a drag.
So yeah, what do you got coming up soon, Shannon? Now that you're a married woman and all that shebang is over.
Well, Ryan and I are going to start looking for a house here in the new year. So yeah, a lot
That's
of our
exciting.
energy is going to go towards that.
Good luck.
But otherwise, it's going to be mostly just enjoying being married and doing this podcast and seeing what happens.
I will say I'm very, because this ties into what I'll be talking about, because the Offbeats have a show coming up. I think it's not this week, but it's next week.
I think.
We're having a show coming up, but Ryan has been such a fun asset to incorporate into the group, and he does so many things. Like, I'm a very basic piano player at heart, and having somebody like Ryan who actually like knows how to play piano in a good way and not like a 3-finger faking it way like I do, he has been such a great element that we've added to the show. And everybody's already been telling me, like, after our practices, like, yeah, Ryan is really going to take us up a notch. Like, we did a practice scene, for instance, on Friday where like I think it was Ben and Susan were in a scene, and like it was about Ben transforming into like a different person, and then in the middle of the song Ryan stopped playing what the song was and then just played like a fluttering and Ben was doing twirls, and it was like he was transforming on stage, and I'm like, I never would have had the skill to be able to do this. So it's very fun to see Ryan like involved in all that and have him be part of the family. And so I'm excited about that going forward.
Yeah.
Don't have a lot of stand-up. I'm only kind of just getting back into it in general, but I'm enjoying having the energy because my energy levels have been so much better lately for a multitude of reasons, and I don't feel completely down, completely exhausted, and completely fat all the time now.
Good.
But I've been trying to do stand-up once a week, or at least go out and see the stand-up people once a week, which has been very nice. So
Very nice.
it's like all these friends I forgot I had who miss me and like me. So
What do you got going on?
Just settling into the new job, really enjoying that, hanging out with the puppy, having no external obligations whatsoever. It's so nice.
That's nice.
Yeah.
seeing Hal occasionally.
Every now and then. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, thank you all for coming and depression vacationing with us for.
Thank you guys for having me.
You are always welcome here. I mean, Ryan's hung on how many times?
Yeah.
It's mostly convenience when I have him. It's like we're doing something after this. Can he come?
It's mostly because she doesn't want him waiting in the car with the windows up the whole time. Although that has
feel bad.
happened.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe I shouldn't do. I mean, it's okay to do to like your boyfriend or your fiance, but once they're your husband, you can't really leave them in the car anymore.
Oh my god, Oh, this is the worst thing to have reminded me of this, but like I've been watching The Sopranos again recently, and you want to talk about horrible like masculine toxicities. At one point, David Provol's character in the second season, and this made me gasp hearing this because, you know, a lot has changed in me since the last time I watched The Sopranos, but he's talking to Michael Imperioli's character about his girlfriend. He's like, you lay a finger, because it's his niece, you lay a finger on my niece, I'll kill you. You want to hit it, put a ring on it. But otherwise, stay away.
Ew.
And I was like, wow.
Ew.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was like, wow, they actually thought about, like, I'll never listen to that Beyonce song the same way again. No, this is getting bad.
All right.
Hal, turn your brain off. Lauren is flabbergasted.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you so much for
Yeah.
joining us, and we will see you again soon.
Goodbye.
Bye.